chapter 16, the urinary system. Okay, so we're going to start with the anatomy of the urinary system. All right, so of course we have the kidneys. And each kidney, these are what's sitting on top right here. That's an adrenal gland. That's an adrenal gland. So, okay, kidney. Each kidney is connected through a tubular structure. They're called ureters. You have two ureters that connect each kidney. From here, there's another ureter, and they're connected to the urinary bladder. And then the urinary bladder is connected to the urethra, which removes urine to the outside of the body. Now, a couple other side factors that are involved, or side anatomical structures that are incredibly important, is the renal artery, and the renal vein. And notice that the renal vein connects right to the the inferior vena cava. And then notice that the renal artery has a direct connection to the aorta. Okay. Now, quickly, the job of the kidneys in a simple form is to produce urine. The ureters, their job is to carry the urine that's formed here and deliver it to the urinary bladder. And then the urinary bladder stores urine until it's time to remove that urine. And then we have the urethra, and that allows urine to exit the system, the entire human body system. All right, let's talk about functions of the urinary system. So some of these functions are common knowledge, some of them are not. Either way, let's go ahead and start with the first one. Okay, excretion of metabolic waste. Okay, excreting metabolic waste, what does that mean? Okay, well, excretion means removing or excreting it out of the system, and metabolic waste are wastes that are made by various metabolic processes that your body produces or performs. All right, so a couple of metabolic wastes, a lot of them are called nitrogenous wastes. Okay, so I'm going to list a few that we need to know for this class. Okay, urea. Urea is a pretty common waste product. It's the byproduct of amino acid metabolism. So when amino acids are broken down or metabolized, they release ammonia from the amino acid, and therefore basically ammonia is good in certain quantities, but not good in high quantities. All right, so ultimately urea and excess ammonia have to be released from the body. All right, so the other nitrogenous waste on the list is ammonium. Okay, and creatine. Okay, creatine comes from the breakdown of a chemical called creatine phosphate, and ultimately creatine phosphate is a byproduct of cellular respiration, just in short. All right, not the big formula of cellular respiration, a different type of cellular respiration in the muscles. All right, then we have uric acid. Okay, and this is from when your body breaks down nucleotides, it releases some uric acid, and these all have to be removed, and so they are. Okay, osmoregulation. So this is an old term that we've seen before. Osmo means water, regulation means regulation. Okay, so osmoregulation is the regulation of water balance, and not just water, water and salt balance. So we have to have this perfect balance of water and salt in our blood. Remember, our blood cells have to be in an isotonic environment, and the urinary system is involved in making sure that your water salt balance in the blood is perfect, is perfectly balanced out, homeostasis. It also is involved in making sure your blood pressure is balanced. It's not too high, it's not too low. And your blood volume as well. And both pressure and volume are directly correlated to salt, to the salt balance, the water salt balance. All right, because if you guys remember from osmoregulation in earlier chapters, remember salts have the direct ability to, because they are a solute, they can cause osmosis. So we have to have a perfect isotonic environment in our human body. We cannot have hyper or hypo. And then again, the urinary system's involved in that. The more salt is in the blood, the greater the volume, and the greater the volume is, it means the greater the blood pressure. Now you have to imagine your blood is inside of your veins and arteries, okay? Once you increase the volume, you're going to start exerting pressure on the walls of the veins and arteries, okay? So this is a huge job, and it's important in keeping you healthy and alive. All right, kidneys. The kidneys also regulate ions. So here, osmoregulation, we're specifically talking about salt and salt water. Now, there's other ions that need to be regulated as well. Okay, potassium, bicarbonate, calcium has to be regulated. Everything in the body has to be at homeostasis, or we will get sick. Okay. The other thing is one of the functions of the urinary system is to maintain your blood pH. We cannot allow the blood to leave this range. It has to stay at 7.3 to 7.4, and it cannot go below or above. So our respiratory system plus the kidneys regulate the acid-base balance of your blood. It is absolutely essential for life. If blood goes acidic or basic on any level, if it leaves this range, that will land someone in the hospital, and it has to be taken care of. All right, and how is this done? All right, now remember, this takes us all the way back to what makes an acid. While having a high concentration of hydrogen ions makes an acid. Okay, and having a low concentration of hydrogen ions makes a base. So by releasing hydrogen ion or reabsorbing hydrogen ion, this will allow for this perfect acid-base balance. All right, there's also hormones involved. So the fourth function is the secretion of hormones. What hormones? All right, here we go. So the first one is called renin. This hormone is responsible for releasing another hormone that is directly involved in a process called reabsorption of sodium ion. Okay, so we'll see what that means later, but that's what we want to know for now. The other one's called erythropoietin. Erythropoietin is responsible for making or stimulating the production of red blood cells. Remember, these are called erythrocytes, so that's a good way to remember this particular function. And vitamin D activation. Okay, vitamin D is an incredibly important vitamin. And one of the reasons is because it promotes calcium absorption. Why would we need calcium absorbed? Well, we need it for our bones, our teeth, and we need to make sure our calcium is properly stored into our muscles so that they can perform their job in muscle contraction. All right. So the four functions: excretion of metabolic waste, osmoregulation, regulating pH, secreting hormones. Okay, let's go on. Now, what about the kidney? The kidney is the principal organ of the urinary system. And that means it's the primary organ of the urinary system. And what it does is it makes urine. That's its job. Okay, now what exactly is urine? We're going to see closely, but technically it's waste. It's waste water and waste solutes. Okay, so it's water plus solutes. All right, now we're going to look at the anatomy closely here. Okay, because there's two major structures. Now, before I get into the structures, I want to point out a couple things. There is your ureter right here. Therefore, that's the same structure here. Okay, there's the renal artery and renal vein. Now, what do arteries do? Okay, they're carrying oxygenated blood into the system. This is a huge artery, and its job is to join with the arterial system and supply the kidney with fresh oxygen and nutrients, and the renal vein is going to take away the waste products and the CO2. All right. Now, while we're talking about these external structures, if I were to cut this open, you would see this. If I were to cut open the center here, where the ureter turns into this secondary structure, this whole thing right here, okay, this is called the renal pelvis. Okay, now if we look closely at the kidney, I'm going to zoom in on that. See these little triangles? Okay, those are not really triangles. They're actually called renal pyramids. And it's kind of cool that they're called that, because if you look at this one, it actually does look like a pyramid. All right, now the two main structures of, regions really of the kidney is the outer region, okay, and that is called the renal cortex. Okay, now see this whole middle region carrying the pyramids and all of it. That is called the renal medulla. So they've zoomed out for us a perfect piece of the kidney. It has everything. It has the pyramid. It has the renal cortex and medulla. So if we zoom in on that, we can see. All right. So renal medulla is in the middle. M for middle. Okay, and renal cortex is going to be the outer region. Okay, and then of course these structures are the renal pyramid. Okay, so The renal pyramid is inside of the medulla. Now, this is an important structure that we're going to spend a lot of time focusing on. Okay, see this this tubule, this bendy, weird looking structure, and watch how it actually dips down into, it starts in the renal cortex and dips down into the renal medulla, and it comes back around. And okay, so this is called a nephron. The nephron is incredibly important, and we're going to have an entire section on the nephron, but that's where it is, and that's how small it is. And in fact, there's tons of nephrons. I showed you one. It actually starts with that ball there, and here's another one. So this whole entire kidney, both of them, they have tons and tons and tons of nephrons that they are in both regions. Half of it is in the renal cortex, part of it is in the renal medulla. All right, so this is just another look at everything from the ureter to the renal pelvis, renal artery, renal vein. Okay, the entire renal cortex is the outer rim. The entire middle is the medulla, which carries, of course, the renal pyramids. And yes, there's extra, structures like the renal papilla and that sort of thing, but those are the main ones that I want you guys to know. Okay, now let's go on with more organs. That was the kidney. Now remember the ureters. Okay, of course we have 2 ureters, 1 for each kidney, and their job is to transport the urine that's formed in the kidneys to the bladder. Okay, and then that's easy enough to remember. Just don't mix up ureters with urethra, because that's a common mistake. Don't make that mistake. Ureters there's 2, and they're completely different. Their job is to connect the kidneys and the bladder. Okay, now the bladder is technically called the urinary bladder, and it can store around anywhere from 600 to 1,000 mils of urine. And then at some point, because this is a muscle, and as it fills up with urine, it's going to trigger these receptors. They're called stretch receptors because the urine will stretch a little bit, and then the nervous system gets involved. Okay, let's not go into that yet. Now, the urethra carries urine outside of the body, and it has 2 sphincters. So it has a sphincter right there, okay, that's is on this side that's closest to the urinary bladder, and then it has another sphincter. So it has 2 sphincters that control urination. All right, here we go. This is actually very interesting. Now, when there's urine in the urinary bladder, at some point it's going to trigger stretch receptors because it will stretch, right? And then it will immediately, as soon as that happens, the nervous system will get involved. And ultimately, there's going to be a pathway to the spinal cord, then the brain, and the nervous system will respond quickly, and then urination will occur. And technically, again, there's an internal sphincter and then an external sphincter, and we have control of the external sphincter. So just FYI. All right. So let's go ahead and look at the nephron. The nephron is the functional unit of the kidney. It is where urine is made. That's its job. The nephron makes urine. Nephrons produce urine. Okay. And now we looked at the nephron before. Now we're going to look in a little bit more detail. A couple of important facts. It's made out of tubules. Tubules are their own kind of structure because these tubules allow for diffusion, osmosis, the movement of molecules past these membranes to an extent. Okay, and every nephron has a blood supply, a major blood supply. Okay, part of what they do is they filter the blood, and then they pull things back. They reabsorb things that we don't want to release. They pull them back out of the blood and return them to the body, things that we need to keep. All right, and again, the nephrons, and also, see these little tubules? That's in reference to, that's what we mean by tubule. All right, now remember, the nephron is quite long, actually, and it dips down into so it's in both parts of the kidney. It's in the cortex and the medulla, and there's not just one. There's tons. It's tons and tons of nephrons in one kidney. Okay, let me see. Okay, that's what it was. Yeah. Off the top of my head, this is, okay, there's approximately 1 million nephron in one kidney. That's a lot. That's a lot. And ultimately, this is absolutely important because we're going to learn how one nephron works, but you have to understand that this is happening at a magnitude times, really it's like more like 2 million because you have 2 kidneys. All right, so let's look at the nephron. First, I'm going to teach you the anatomy, and then we will we'll go into the actual urine formation. Okay, so anatomy, here we go. Da-da-da. Okay, now the beginning of this. Okay, now let's take a look. See this kind of like capsule? That's exactly what it is. Okay, this is called the glomerular capsule. It's also called the Bowman's capsule. Okay, that is the first anatomical structure that I want you guys to know. Okay, now next, see this network? Okay, that is called the glomerulus. This whole thing. And it's actually a network of capillaries. So it would make sense that the capsule that holds the glomerulus would be called the glomerular capsule, right? Okay, now I want to talk about these arteries. Okay, here's the renal artery, and it connects into this artery, and it's called the afferent artery. Afferent, by the way, means in. So if you're taking notes, which you should be, definitely you want to know that afferent means in. So blood comes in, and this is blood coming in, right? And it's going to move into the glomerular capsule and pass through, the glomerulus, and pass through all of these, the whole network, and then go this way, out through the efferent arteriole. What do you think efferent means? Out. Whoops. I don't like the way that box is. How do I fix the size of that? There we go. Out. Efferent means out. Aha. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the next structure. Okay, notice that it's not, that's not the end of the vascular system here. Now, there are there are veins and arteries that are intertwined with the entire nephron. You can clearly see that all throughout this region, right? Now, really quick, let's go back to the nephron itself. Okay, let's recap here. So we have the glomerulus. Okay, the glomerulus is a capillary network. It gets blood from the afferent arterioles, and then blood leaves the glomerulus through efferent arterioles, and then of course the glomerulus is held inside of the Bowman's capsule, aka the glomerular capsule. Now the next part of this structure, the nephron, is this tubule. See this tubule right here? Okay, that's called the proximal convoluted tubule. Okay, remember what proximal means. Proximal means close in proximity, close to the glomerulus. Okay, now and convoluted means twisted, like that. So that's why it's called the proximal convoluted tubule. Okay, so the proximal convoluted tubule goes all the way down, and then it turns into this loop. So it stops around there. Actually, yeah, right around there. And then see how we up here in this region, that is what? The renal cortex, don't forget. And then now we've dipped down into the renal medulla. So we go from the glomerulus in the glomerular capsule to the proximal convoluted tubule. And then I'm going to trace this loop. See that loop that dips down and comes back around? Aha. That is called the loop of Henle. Loop of Henle. Okay, the loop of Henle has two parts. The descending limb. Okay, the descending means down. And then the other side of it, which is the ascending limb. Okay, and what comes next? All right. And then afterwards we have this distal convoluted tubule. What does distal mean? Distant, far away from the original location of blood, which is the glomerulus. Okay, then we have the distal convoluted tubule, and then if you follow it all the way down, this is the collecting duct. All right. So let's kind of review a couple of things. The anatomy is important, and then the physiology, which is the actual urine formation, is important. Now, ultimately, the glomerular capsule is going to hold the glomerulus. We know that, and this is where filtration starts. Okay, the proximal tubule is in the renal medulla. It actually has a big role that we're going to discuss later. Then we have our loop of Henle. The distal tubule is distant, the collecting duct. Okay, the only thing I want to say about the collecting duct is see these little branches sticking out? Okay, they're not branches. They actually connect to other nephrons. So several nephrons will dump into the same collecting duct, and therefore and then that collecting duct is going to connect to the renal pelvis, which connects to the urethra, the ureters, and then urine is out. Okay, so this is just anatomy. Everything that I've said other than anatomy, is not. I haven't gotten to the full lecture of what's of the urine formation. All right, so let's talk about other functions and special blood vessels that are involved. The renal artery, of course, is the major artery that supplies supplies the kidney with fresh blood. Then we have arterioles that are small, and we have the afferent and efferent, which we just saw. The afferent allows blood to move into the glomerulus, and efferent carries blood away. Now we have other networks as well. We have a glomerulus. The glomerulus is a network of capillaries, and these are important. Okay, super important. I'm going to talk about them later. Actually, in upcoming slides, not later. Okay, the peritubular network, okay, is a capillary network that surrounds the proximal and distal tubules. Okay, so it has a big role. And then we have another capillary network called the vasa recta, which runs parallel to the loop of Henle. Okay, so these are all of the blood vessels associated. All right, so urine formation occurs in 3 basic steps: glomerular filtration, tubular reabsorption, and secretion. Okay, so glomerular filtration is when these particular solutes and ions and water, and I will actually teach you exactly what moves in to the capsule, but they leave the blood. So these substances leave the blood, okay, and they're going to leave the blood and enter that capsule, the Bowman's capsule or glomerular capsule. Okay, reabsorption is when after filtration, there are things that need to be returned to the body. A lot of the fluids will get returned, certain solutes will get returned. And then tubular secretion is when certain things that were not able to get filtered out during step 1 will get added to the urine at that point. And okay, and really it's that simple, but in this format. But now we're going to look at it in a little more of a complex format. And I'll tell you, yes, you do have to know all of it. And I'm going to make this as easy as possible. I have a great video for you guys, so it should be really good. All right, so here we go. Now, blood comes in, okay, it's coming from the afferent arteriole, and it's going to enter the glomerulus, which is this network, right? And because there's quite a bit of pressure inside of the glomerulus and the glomerular capsule, the glomerulus itself, it's going to move naturally these molecules. They are going to leave your blood here from the glomerulus: water, urea, glucose, which is sugar, amino acids, uric acid, salts. Now, don't forget salts. That means sodium, ions, and don't forget that chloride. Okay, so that's what we mean by salts. Those molecules are going to leave your blood, and where do they go? Into the glomerulus capsule, right there. Okay, now they don't stay there forever. They're going to move from that point into the proximal convoluted tubule. Now, before I move to step number 2, let me just show you. There it is. Step number 1, glomerular filtration: water, salts, nutrients, molecules, and waste molecules move from the glomerulus to the capsule. Okay, and this mixture, all of this stuff right here, this is referred to as filtrate. It now has a new name because it's unique, and that's what it's called. It's called filtrate, this mixture of stuff. Okay, now, so filtrate is going to move out of the capsule, and it's going to move in one direction. It's going to move to the proximal convoluted tubule. And step number 2 is with the proximal convoluted tubule. And see this capillary network over here? Okay, now that's really important because inside of this tubule, because there's a direct connection here. Like this blood vessel is right there, and they're very, very close. This is called the paratubular capillary network, and therefore the proximal convoluted tubule can return. See this arrow pointing to the blood? Okay, make this connection. It's green because it's in reference to this. Okay, so what's going to happen is nutrients, salts are going to be actively reabsorbed from the convoluted tubules into the paracapillary network. So they're going to leave and move into the blood. Leave the tubule, move into the blood. Okay, so we'll discuss exactly which ones do that. Okay, but definitely there's going to be sodium, glucose will go back, and again, I'll get more into that in upcoming slides. Okay, so this is called tubular reabsorption. So the body takes back the things that it needs, and is typically nutrients and salt. All right, now this is going to keep moving though. After that reabsorption happens, it's going to keep moving and moving. And it will move down the loop of Henle, down the descending column, and up the ascending. Okay. And it's going to keep moving into the distal convoluted tubule. Okay, the distal convoluted tubule is where tubular secretion happens. Okay, see how this arrow is pointing from the blood to the tube? Because that is the direction that these molecules are moving. They're gonna leave the blood and enter here. So what kind of things would even go here, and how come they didn't, join in over here in the filtrate? Well, they have their reasons. However, there are certain ions that are going to move through, like hydrogen ion. Hydrogen ions directly involved in regulating pH. Penicillin, so like medicines, drugs, things like that, they're going to enter the urine at this point in tubular secretion. Also, there's going to be potassium that will be either taken up or reabsorbed, and it just depends on what the body has inside of it, what the body needs to get rid of. And that's why it's called secretion, because it's being secreted out of the capillary network. All right, so then that occurs, and then the urine and everything that's left over is going to move to the collecting duct. Okay, so what's left here? We're going to have water. Okay, these are elements of the urine: urea, uric acid, sodium chloride, salts, ammonia, which is NH4, creatine. Okay. All right, now I've given actually